My ex-wife tried to sue me for everything. She didn't know I'd recorded the whole conversation. I remember the day Caroline told me she wanted a divorce. It wasn't entirely unexpected. We'd been growing apart for years, but her timing caught me off guard. I had just secured the biggest client of my career, a deal that would finally put my consulting firm on solid financial footing after 15 years of building it from nothing. "I need space," she said over dinner at our anniversary meal, of all places. "I'm not happy anymore, David." 22 years of marriage, summarized and dismissed over salmon and Chardonnay at Giovanni's, where we'd celebrated every anniversary since moving to Boston. I simply nodded, surprised by how calm I felt. Perhaps I'd known this was coming longer than I'd admitted to myself. What I couldn't have anticipated was what followed. Within weeks, casual discussions about separating our lives devolved into heated arguments about assets. Caroline had been a marketing executive when we met, but had scaled back to part-time consulting work after we married. We'd agreed it was the right choice for us, especially as my business gained momentum. The truth was uncomfortable but straightforward. While she had contributed to our household in meaningful ways, the majority of our financial assets stemmed from my business efforts. I'd always been careful with documentation, maintaining clear boundaries between personal and business finance, a habit formed during my first failed startup that had proven invaluable over the years. "You can keep the house in Wellesley," I offered. "I'll take the condo downtown and my business assets. We'll split the investment accounts proportionally based on contribution." Her response was a cold stare across our kitchen island. "That's not how this is going to work, David." The warning signs were there, and I should have recognized them sooner. Caroline had been meeting frequently with her friend Melissa, whose recent divorce had been particularly contentious. I later learned that Melissa had introduced Caroline to her attorney, Eleanor Winters, a name that would soon become all too familiar to me. "David, could you meet me for coffee? I think we should talk before the lawyers get too involved," Caroline texted one morning in October. We met at a quiet cafe near my office. The weather had turned, bringing that distinctive New England autumn chill that requires a jacket but not quite a coat. Caroline arrived 15 minutes late, immaculately dressed in the tailored charcoal suit she reserved for important client presentations. "I want to be reasonable," she began, stirring her untouched Americano. "But my attorney says I'm entitled to half of everything, including your business." I carefully measured my response. "The business predates our marriage, Caroline, and you've never been involved in its operations. I supported you. I put my career on hold. That entitles me to compensation." There was something rehearsed about her delivery. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, growing increasingly tense. When Caroline stepped away to take a call, I made a decision that would ultimately save me. I activated the voice recorder on my phone. Not something I'd planned, but something in her demeanor triggered a protective instinct I hadn't known I possessed. When she returned, her approach shifted dramatically. "Look, here's what's going to happen," she said, her voice lowered. "Either you agree to a settlement that includes 50% of your business valuation and all investment accounts, or I'll tell the court about your abuse." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Abuse? What are you talking about?" Caroline leaned forward, her voice eerily calm. "It doesn't matter if it's true. What matters is that it will drag out the proceedings, cost you clients, and ruin your reputation. By the time you clear your name, your business will be worthless anyway." "This is extortion," I said quietly. She smiled. "This is divorce, David, and I intend to win. Eleanor says with the right judge, even the suggestion of emotional abuse will be enough to secure a favorable judgment. Nobody will believe you over me." As she outlined her strategy, fabricated instances of controlling behavior, manipulated text messages taken out of context, and coached testimony from her sister, I sat in stunned silence, allowing her to incriminate herself completely, my phone recording every calculated word. The following months were a study in calculated restraint. I secured Thomas Mitchell as my attorney, a former colleague known for his methodical approach to complex cases. I shared the recording with him immediately, but we agreed not to reveal this evidence until absolutely necessary. "Let her build her case first," Thomas advised. "If she commits to these allegations in legal documentation and sworn testimony, the recording becomes even more damaging." The preliminary hearing arrived on a bitter January morning. The Boston courthouse was overheated as usual, the air dry and stale. Caroline sat across the aisle with Eleanor, both projecting confident determination. I maintained my composure even as Caroline's attorney outlined a narrative of systematic emotional manipulation and financial control that bore no resemblance to our marriage. Furthermore, Your Honor, Eleanor continued, Mrs. Harrington sacrificed significant career advancement to support her husband's business venture. We have documentation demonstrating that her marketing expertise was regularly utilized without compensation, constituting a substantial contribution to the company's current valuation. When my turn came, Thomas simply requested financial discovery documentation and suggested that all allegations would be addressed in due course. The judge set a trial date for March, and we filed out of the courtroom. "You seemed awfully confident in there," Caroline remarked as we waited for the elevator. "Don't count on that lasting." I looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered how we'd arrived at this point. "Caroline, it's not too late to be honest about this. We could still resolve this reasonably," she laughed. "Reasonable left the building when you decided your business was more important than our marriage." As the elevator doors closed between us, I felt an unexpected sense of clarity. This confrontation had become inevitable long before the divorce papers were filed. The trial began on a surprisingly mild March morning. The courtroom windows were cracked open, allowing fresh air to circulate for perhaps the first time since fall. Caroline took the stand first, delivering a carefully constructed narrative of marginalization and mistreatment. "He controlled every aspect of our finances," she testified, her voice breaking at precisely timed intervals. "I had to justify every purchase, while he invested in his business without consultation. When I expressed concern, he would become emotionally distant, sometimes for weeks." Her performance was compelling. I acknowledged that much. Eleanor guided her through prepared testimony, establishing a pattern of behavior designed to maximize financial compensation. By the time they finished, even Thomas looked concerned, despite knowing what we held in reserve. When it was our turn, Thomas began methodically addressing the financial claims, introducing documentation of joint account access, evidence of Caroline's independent spending, and records of consulting fees paid to her for occasional project work with my firm. Then came the moment we'd prepared for. "Your Honor, we would like to introduce evidence directly contradicting Mrs. Harrington's testimony regarding my client's behavior and her motivations in this proceeding." Eleanor objected immediately, but the judge allowed Thomas to continue. He explained that I had recorded a conversation with Caroline prior to legal proceedings, in which she explicitly outlined her intention to fabricate abuse allegations to secure financial advantage. The courtroom fell silent as the recording played. Caroline's voice, clear and unmistakable, detailing her strategy to leverage false allegations regardless of truth. Her face transformed from confident to ashen, as her own words filled the courtroom. "Furthermore," Thomas continued after the recording concluded, "we have evidence that Mrs. Harrington consulted with her attorney about this strategy before filing for divorce, suggesting premeditated intent to commit perjury." The judge called an immediate recess. When court resumed an hour later, Eleanor requested a private conference with the judge and Thomas. I waited in the hallway, maintaining the same composed exterior I'd relied on throughout my professional life, though inside I felt nothing but profound disappointment. The judge's ruling came swiftly. The division of assets would proceed according to Massachusetts equitable distribution standards, with my business interests remaining entirely separate. Caroline would retain the Wellesley house, but would be responsible for its mortgage. The investment accounts would be divided based on documented contribution. And most significantly, the judge referred the evidence of potential perjury to the district attorney's office for review. As we left the courthouse, Caroline attempted to approach me, but Thomas intervened. "Any communication should go through counsel," he advised her. I watched her walk away, shoulders rigid with indignation rather than defeat. In that moment I realized that, regardless of the legal outcome, there were no winners here, only the conclusion of a chapter that had lasted far longer than it should have. That evening, I sat alone in my downtown condo, looking out over the Boston skyline as lights illuminated against the darkening sky. The vindication I'd expected to feel was overshadowed by reflection on how thoroughly two people who once shared everything could become strangers armed with strategies against each other. I powered down my phone, silencing the incoming messages from friends and family who had heard about the verdict. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, rebuilding client relationships strained by the public proceedings, considering potential relocation now that Boston held more difficult memories than positive ones, and perhaps most importantly, relearning how to define success beyond financial and legal victories. The recording had saved my assets and reputation, but the experience had taught me something more valuable: the importance of trusting my instincts and protecting my boundaries, even with those I once believed would never threaten them. It wasn't the lesson I would have chosen, but it was one I wouldn't forget.